Tonight on The Wrap, the PM's regrets about Lord Mandelson. The Prime Minister tells Sky News that he beats himself up and dwells on the mistake he made in hiring the disgraced peer.
There's no criticism anybody else can level at me that will be as harsh as the criticism I've dished out for myself.
Donald Trump's chief negotiator says Iran is looking for an off-ramp from the war in the Middle East. His boss again delays a threat to attack Iran's energy infrastructure, but tells Tehran to get serious.
They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal.
As Lebanon's Deputy Prime Minister tells Sky News that his country risks becoming another Gaza, we speak to medics treating casualties in the country's south.
The doctors tell us they're seeing rising numbers of casualties, not just civilians, but amongst them, many children.
Here, a warning that the UK is facing a bigger economic hit from the Iran war than any other major country. Plus, Olympic chiefs block transgender athletes from all women's sports, announcing new rules that include mandatory sex testing. We discuss the day's biggest stories with the Labour peer, Baroness Chakrabarti, and the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Michelle Donlan. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including coverage of the war in the Middle East. Good evening, Shami and Michelle. Welcome to you both. And I'll be interested to get your views on this. The Prime Minister has told Sky News that he beats himself up over his decision to hire Lord Mandelson, and he dwells on it. Files released early this month reveals Sir Keir Starmer had been warned before employing him as US ambassador that Mandelson's links to paedophile Jeffrey Epstein posed a reputational risk. In an exclusive interview with our political editor Beth Rigby for the Electoral Dysfunction podcast, the Prime Minister says he hates the fact that he made such a mistake. Let's take a look.
When I looked at that vetting document, the continued friendship with Epstein, the sackings from Blair and Brown administrations, I don't get why you put him back into post. Surely your instinct was, I don't want this guy near my government. Are you angry at yourself that you maybe didn't follow your instinct?
Nobody has been harder on me in relation to the mistake I made there than me. And I'll tell you for why. I've spent years trying to deal with violence against women and girls. And as I look back at it now, and the mistake I make, I've been really hard on myself. In the immediate days after this all came out, I was particularly hard on myself. So, yeah, everybody else was criticising, I guess all that, but nobody was criticising me more than myself. I'm not trying to, make that a mitigation or an excuse, but I know I made a mistake.
I can see that you feel that.
I know that after nearly 20 years fighting violence against women and girls, I made a mistake there. And I hate the fact I made that mistake. And I dwell on it. I beat myself up about it. It's certainly not a mistake I'd ever repeat. But there's no criticism anybody else can level at me that will be as harsh as the criticism I've dished out for myself.
Michelle, do you accept that explanation from the Prime Minister?
Well, look, I accept that he's a human being and he is reflecting upon what he did and the decisions that he took. And I think it would be very bizarre if he doesn't beat himself up because it really is proving to be death by a thousand cuts. And we know that there's the next tranche of Mandelson files coming out just after Easter. Well, there'll be more blows, I'm sure, for Keir. But really, at the end of the day, this is highlighting that he doesn't really get the politics of politics because there were neon flashing signs, weren't there? This was a man that had the label of Prince of Darkness. He'd been sacked twice. The National Security Advisor had advised against it. We know it had been in Keir's box saying that there are warnings, and yet he still made that decision. And I do think that it will prove monumentally catastrophic in terms of his own personal legacy.
Despite the fact that he's saying there, I know I made a mistake, it does still call into question his judgment, doesn't it?
Well, look, he certainly looked chastened, but you would be chastened, as Michelle said it. What can I say? It was a terrible, terrible mistake, and we all had seen the stories, particularly in the Financial Times, I think, for some time, about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. At the end of the day, there was no doubt some political advice, perhaps from Mr. McSweeney, who was apparently close to the former Lord Mandelson. But, you know, advisors advise and ministers decide.
I mean, Lord Mandelson has denied all wrongdoing. Yes. We must state that very, very clearly. But the Prime Minister previously saying that, you know, he repeatedly lied during the vetting process.
Yeah, but one of the fundamental problems with that excuse, if you like, is that he has come out that he basically delegated that questioning of Mandelson to other people, including McSweeney, who we know had a very, very close relationship, so wouldn't have been impartial in that process. And the problem the Prime Minister has around this whole thing is that it's got so many layers, hasn't it? It's just come out today that Mandelson's own personal phone was used for the first month, so we can't get the WhatsApps from that period when he was in office as ambassador. So it's drip by drip by drip of this scandal that is coming out.
I mean, there's really, I suppose, nothing the Prime Minister could say now to appease people's judgment that he made the wrong call, and knowingly.
Well, I mean, the really harsh thing will be if this has an impact on the May elections, because then a price will be paid by Labour councillors and members of the Scottish Parliament and the Welsh Senate and so on. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Mandelson issue is the determinative issue in these upcoming elections. But the really tragic thing is you heard Keir Starmer talking about his time as DPP and the priority that he gave at that point to, and I remember the priority that he gave to the prosecution of violence against women. I guess the problem is, if your whole political USP is that you are Mr. Rules and Mr. Rectitude and the grown-up in the room, etc., this is even more damaging than it would have been over, say, a Boris Johnson, who people don't expect the same standards of. It's tragic, and you can see it on his face in that interview with Beth Rigby.
Well, Beth Rigby's full interview with Sir Keir Starmer is in the latest episode of Electoral Dysfunction, and people can see that or listen to that wherever they get their podcasts from, and also will be broadcast in full on Sky News tomorrow morning, or you can watch it on our YouTube channel. Let's move on to Iran now, shall we? And after days of claims, counterclaims, threats and rhetoric, we received today perhaps the clearest assessment yet of the state of peace talks between the United States and Iran. America's top negotiator, Steve Witkoff, confirmed for the first time the US has presented Iran with a 15-point framework for a ceasefire. And he said Iran was looking for an off-ramp, but that the challenge now was to persuade Tehran to make a deal. Well, let's speak to David Blevins, who we're going to speak to him shortly, but we're going to see his report first of all.
They're firing tomahawks, but they're talking too, so says the Commander-in-Chief.
They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal.
Nearly 4 weeks into this war, he claims Iran is signalling its intention to negotiate, now that the United States has removed Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
The supreme leader wasn't so supreme, no longer with us. It's very sad.
The president's special envoy seems optimistic.
I can say this: we will see where things lead, and if we can convince Iran that this is the inflection point with no good alternatives for them, other than more death and destruction. We have told Iran one last thing: don't miscalculate again.
But the self-proclaimed war secretary doesn't sound convinced.
We pray for a deal and we welcome a deal, and we have the ultimate deal maker to make it happen. But in the meantime, as I said yesterday, the Department of War will continue negotiating with bombs.
And the president doesn't sound like a man under pressure.
I mean, I read a story today that I'm desperate to make a deal. If I was desperate, he'd be the first to know me. Let's get the hell out of there. I'm the opposite of desperate. I don't care.
So the bombs continue to drop It's a military triumph, they say, and one of their own making.
I'm so disappointed in NATO because this was a test for NATO. They have an expression, a great expression, never forget. You can never forget.
The UK still incurring most of the president's wrath.
The UK say that we'll send, this is 3 weeks ago, we'll send our aircraft carriers, which aren't the best aircraft carriers, by the way. They're toys compared to what we have. But we'll send our aircraft carrier when the war is over. I said, oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Don't bother. We don't need it. And we don't need it, and we don't need them.
If Trump's feeling the heat, he isn't showing it, talking at length about his pens.
So this pen is very inexpensive, but it writes well. I like it.
How his Treasury Secretary looks.
I'm looking at this guy. He's central casting. Even the glasses are perfect. Where do you get those glasses?
And how long he'll wait for a breakthrough.
In Trump time, a day, you know what it is? That's an eternity.
No rush then for Donald Trump's war cabinet. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
David, since we saw the president speaking there, he has made some concessions towards Iran in a social media post saying that he will delay any hit on energy infrastructure for a period of, I think is it 10 days?
That's right. A concession to Iran, according to President Trump, and that is significant because this isn't just about reality on the ground, of course. It is about perception. Whatever the reality is on the ground regarding extra troop deployments, another 1,000 soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division in the United States now on their way to the Middle East, Donald Trump needs to create the perception that his military intervention has brought Iran to the negotiating table. That's why we are repeatedly hearing him say in that post this evening and at the cabinet meeting today, Iran wants more time. Iran needs an off-ramp. Iran is desperate for a deal, begging me for a deal. But there are many who would say those things could equally apply to the United States, that it is the administration stalling for time that needs an off-ramp, that is desperate for a deal. So when we hear his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, say this is a potential inflection point for Iran, a moment of decision for them, it could equally be a moment of decision for the United States, a choice between a ceasefire or putting troops and boots on the ground.
Certainly, listening to Donald Trump, he would say that it's Iran that's desperate for a deal. But I mean, what's your reading of the situation, Michelle?
Well, we've all had a bit of whiplash, haven't we, in the last few weeks, similar to when it was the Greenland situation, because things keep changing, and so does the tune that Donald Trump is singing himself. But actually, the response from Iran was very different to these 15 points, because they came back with their own 5 conditions, many of which will be completely red lines from the United States, including that they would pay for damages to Iran. Of course, they're not going to do that. And also recognise that they had control over the Strait. Again, that is going to be a key decider as well, because look at what this is doing and the shockwaves it is causing across the globe to oil prices and the impact it's having on economies. And that is what's making Trump nervous now.
Shami, do you think that there are serious negotiations going on behind the scenes, and that's very different to the bluster and the bellicose rhetoric that we hear broadcast? Do you think that there are negotiations?
Well, there's clearly a line, some kind of a line of communication via Pakistan. So we know that there aren't face-to-face. I think we're pretty convinced there are not face-to-face talks. We know this between the US and Iran, but Pakistan is placing itself as this sort of almost broker, whatever. So messages seem to be going back and forth, and that is a start. That's what we hope is a start, and we have to hope that they are positive, that they, however slowly, however tenuous, that they do begin to move in the right direction for the reasons that Michelle gave. And actually, we're bearing the brunt even more than the US, but politically, for the president, he is in quite a delicate position, because if he can't deliver a deal, and he's supposed to be Mr. Art of the Deal, again, if your USP is something, you are setting a standard for yourself that people will judge you by. And I don't believe that external military adventures are very popular in the US any more than they are here in the UK. So I do think he will want to be seen to make some progress.
Yeah, his popularity has gone down to an all-time low. I think he had personally hoped this would help him and give him a bit of a boost in the polls, but it's proving the opposite.
But when you hear him today sort of criticising NATO again, previously he said, you know, if they don't negotiate, we'll bomb out our little hearts out. I mean, very flippant about people, the loss of life.
But I think that kind of rhetoric we've come to almost expect from Trump, haven't we? And that if things aren't going quite his way or the way that they had intended, suddenly someone else is to blame and they come into the frame, like the comments about NATO today. We've got to remember that warnings and briefings weren't even given to NATO allies in advance of this happening. So I think it's a little bit of an overreach for Trump to make those comments today.
And it is difficult to know what to believe, what's been said to who and when. Steve Witkoff today claiming that Iran told the US that they have enough uranium to make 11 nuclear bombs.
That would be a very strange thing for them to claim. Look, I'm none the wiser, and I agree with Michelle. We've almost become, this is the tragedy, we've become used to this completely capricious president who says one thing one day and seems to backtrack the next. What I'm not sure about is whether behind the scenes there's some kind of method in the madness, whether there's a little Politburo sitting around Donald Trump. You know, there have been rumours, to say the least, about insider trading and some people in and around the White House actually making quite a lot of money out of speculation around the war. I don't know whether they are having their fun and making some money and then will reach for the off-ramp. I hope, I pray that this ends soon, because it is terrible for the world economy and it's terrible for the people who are getting blown to smithereens.
Yeah,
but on that topic of it ending soon, we mustn't forget that the voices of some of those other regions within the countries within the region of the Gulf, who, like the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who, according to reports, is advocating that it doesn't stop quite soon, because they'll leave the situation in a right mess for those other countries, who will then have to solidify again a relationship with Iran. So they're really worried that they're going to be left in a much worse situation than they began.
Well, this is always the problem. This is always the problem with wars, that, you know, when you haven't planned, when you haven't, forget anything you expect me to say about illegality and morality. The practical challenge of war is you better have an end game, because if you don't, you could end up with a far worse situation than the one that you started with.
And certainly relationships within the Gulf will change now with Iran because of what's happened. Let's turn now to the impact of the war on Lebanon. Medics there have told Sky News they fear that Israel's campaign against Hezbollah risks turning the country into another Gaza. The IDF says its activities are legitimate operations targeting the militant group. Our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, is in southern Lebanon and sent this update.
Patching up Lebanon's victims of war is a long and heartbreaking process. And right now, there's a constant stream of them. This patient, like so many of the casualties, was wounded in an Israeli airstrike which struck in the dead of night whilst he slept with his family. He now has 65% burns across his body, which will require months of treatment.
And the doctors tell us they're seeing rising numbers of casualties, not just civilians, but amongst them, many children.
The medics are mostly volunteers, among them 2 British doctors, both of whom have worked in Gaza, and a doctor in exile from Gaza. And they all see alarming similarities between what's happening there and now what's going on in Lebanon.
What is being done here is exactly the systemic destruction, systemic gradual occupation as happened in Gaza. Started with evacuation of all people displaced to the north, and then systemic deliberate destruction of all infrastructure, mainly the hospitals too.
The doctors want more action from world leaders to ensure health workers are protected.
The international humanitarian law has been ignored, and nobody is doing anything about it. There's, I'd say there's some words, a little bit of, strong words occasionally, but as usual, no action.
Well, Well, Lebanon's Deputy Prime Minister has told Sky News that war crimes are being committed by Israel. Israel insists its operation in Lebanon is focused on Hezbollah infrastructure and is a defensive effort. Tariq Mitri told Sky's Yalda Hakim that international law is not being respected.
We're documenting every violation of international humanitarian law to the best of our abilities. And there is no doubt that Israel is committing war crimes, in my view. It is violating the Geneva Accords, starting with the two basic principles in the international humanitarian law: the principle of distinction between combatants and civilians, and the principle of proportionality. Neither of these two basic principles of international humanitarian law are respected by Israel, and Israel has a track record of just ignoring such two principles. I mean, look at Gaza.
Well, as I mentioned, Israel insists that it's targeting Hezbollah infrastructure and says the ground operation it has launched in Lebanon is a defensive effort to protect northern Israel from Hezbollah attacks. Sky News has approached the IDF for comment. We haven't got a specific comment from them, but we know that they're expanding their ground operation into Lebanon. That has come out today, and particularly into southern Lebanon, which is where the Deputy Prime Minister was talking about.
Yeah, and I think throughout the last few weeks, really, Iran has been getting all of the headlines and the focus. But actually, in Lebanon, I think the death count is estimated to be over 1,100 now, and a fifth of the population have been displaced. So it's having a huge and horrific impact. And of course, these stories of hospitals and people at their most vulnerable being affected are horrific. We do have to remember that it was Hezbollah that attacked Israel in the first place. Though I'm not excusing for 1 minute attacks on hospitals, but I am putting it back into context of why this is happening and the fact that Hezbollah is basically like a tumour that has been left and created by Iran, and one that does need to be removed. But the human cost is awful.
And there is this point about making a distinction between civilians and legitimate military targets. Now, it's a murky area when you've got densely populated areas, or when there's, when there's claim and counterclaim about what a facility is. But Human Rights Watch, which is a well-respected, neutral international NGO, is talking about white phosphorus being used, for example, which can be really problematic when it's used in the proximity of civilians. Really, really nasty stuff. Really, really bad injuries are going to ensue if you use white phosphorus in an inappropriate way.
Yeah, and the Deputy Prime Minister there, as we heard, accusing Israel of war crimes. Let's move on to the economy, how that is being affected by the war. The assessment of the economic impact of the war in the Middle East has found that the UK will be the hardest hit amongst leading nations. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has more.
How bad is this going to be for the economy? We've just got our first assessment from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, this big kind of economic institution. And they say, in short, not good. This was their forecast for economic growth before the war came along, and they were expecting it to get a little bit weaker in the coming quarters. That's kind of one quarter in a row, just for global growth. But now, and that's partly because of trade barriers and all of the other things going on in the global economy. But now, look, this is the pathway they're expecting. So they're downgrading their forecast for the global picture. But when you break it down by countries around the world, it's kind of striking here. So I've highlighted the UK there. This is the last year that we've had. And they were already expecting growth to be a bit weaker this year. So the UK was kind of mid-table last year. This year it was expected to be kind of around about there, so a little bit weaker. But now that we've had, well, what's happened in the last few weeks, here's where they expect it to go. So look, the UK has just been downgraded quite significantly. Interestingly, the US gets upgraded. So stronger growth in the US because of what's happening. That's partly because we've got higher gas prices, higher oil prices, big oil producer, big gas producer in the US. But the UK downgraded actually by 0.5 percentage points, which is more than any other economy. So a big downgrade, not good news for the UK, and raises the question, of course, why is this happening? Well, part of the explanation is that the growth was already relatively weak, and the latest numbers aren't particularly promising. But partly it's a few other things as well. Think about the fact that we've got very high debt levels in the UK and the debt interest costs are rising here. And actually, this is just showing you the 10-year bond yield in the UK. It's kind of what the government, we have to pay on government debt, highest since 2008. And if you compare the UK to other countries around the G7, so other major economies, look, that's the rest of the G7, that's the UK. It's kind of an outlier. So we're paying higher interest than most other countries around the world. On top of that, energy costs. Now, the extent to which higher oil prices, gas prices feed into inflation differs by country. So that's the US, an extra 0.3% on inflation. The euro area, an extra 0.98% on inflation. But for the UK, it's even more. I mean, it's not much more than the euro area, but nonetheless, it is more. So inflation feeds through in a way that it kind of, is more exacerbating for the UK than elsewhere. A final thing to note, there is a real impact on all of our pockets, but it differs by different income groups. So for high-income groups, the extent to which inflation is affected by energy costs, which is basically what these bars are showing you, is not that high. But for low-income groups, because more of their income is spent on energy, it is higher in the UK than basically anywhere else. Put all of that together, and it helps explain why, particularly for low-income households, but also for the UK as a whole, the economic implications of the Iran war are potentially very serious.
So the UK's economic hit as a result of the war is the worst of all the major economies, or that the US seemingly is doing a lot better.
Well, the US thing is really unfair, isn't it? But I'm guessing some people always make money out of war. So I don't know, I can't drill down into the detail of why it is that the US is doing quite well out of this. I don't know whether it's arms manufacturers or others who've been speculating around the war, but that is deeply unsettling given America's role.
I mean,
in
primarily it's because they kind of produce their own energy, and the US growth is predicted higher because of their exports, large amounts of hydrocarbons. So they're not as reliant as we are.
Yeah, you're quite right. One of the key reasons is because of these high energy costs, because we import so much of our energy supply, and it leaves us very vulnerable. The OECD have said that inflation is going to go up probably to about 4%. We were expecting interest rates to come down this year. They're probably going to go up twice now, is what economists are predicting. And if we look at the energy costs, the cost on business is huge. There was a study out by the CBI and Energy UK that said that for gas, it's 60% higher, and for electricity, 70% higher than it was pre the war between Ukraine and Russia. So that's a staggering increase that business is trying to grapple with. And of course, that's going to feed through to the rest of the economy and affect growth.
Yeah, sharp increase in crude oil, jet fuel, diesel, fertilisers, and trickles down to food because the food has to be transported. So completely across the board.
Well, clearly the government is going to have to keep under review measures that are required to... They've already committed to helping the poorest families, but it may be subject to how this pans out, that over time they need to take other targeted measures as well. I don't think the answer is, as Kemi Badenoch suggests, drill, baby, drill in the North Sea. I don't think this is a moment to abandon our climate change commitments. In the longer term, investment in greener energy sources will also provide us with greater fuel security. But the short term is hard, no question.
And we shall see whether we actually get to the extent of having fuel rationing, something that we'll be talking about in the papers coming up next. We'll be taking a first look at the front pages of those newspapers. Do stay with us if you can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
You are watching The Wrap. Time now to see what's making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Well, on the front of the Metro, Donald Trump says the UK's aircraft carriers are toys compared to US ships. The US president also says he's extended his deadline for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. That's on the front of The Guardian. The Financial Times leads on a report that the UK will face the biggest economic hit from the Iran war of any major country. The Eye also reflects on the state of the economy with the headline, UK faces triple shock of inflation, weak growth and energy crunch. The government comes under fire in the Express as it emerges more than 30,000 hospitality firms have shut since the Chancellor's first budget. Rachel Reeves also features on the front of the Mail, who accuse her of profiteering from rising fuel prices. The firing of a top banker following amid growing fears of a cover-up is on the front of the Telegraph. The Mirror reports on new guidance on screen time for children under 5, which experts say should be limited to 1 hour per day. The Sun also has the story. Its headline, 1 hour is your lot, tots. Meanwhile, The Star warns fake World Cup football kits could make you ill due to chemicals in the fabrics. Well, let's start with the Metro and their headline. Trump throws our toys out of pram in reference to him saying that the UK fleet were basically toys compared to what the United States could offer, insulting the aircraft carriers HMS Queen Elizabeth, HMS Prince of Wales.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were saying before, really, doesn't it, about the rhetoric that Trump often uses, especially when he feels backed into a corner or a little bit vulnerable. He tends to lash out at others and deflect, and I think this is a typical example of that. But he does need to be a little bit careful because this war is taking a lot longer than anybody had anticipated, especially than he'd anticipated, I think, if all accounts are true, and it's costing a fortune. We're in the tens of billions that they've invested already, and according to Telegraph sources, they are looking at shortages when it comes to defensive and offensive weaponry. So I think this talk and bravado could come back to bite him if he's not careful.
But he is saying that this is a wider attack on NATO, and says that he will remember.
Yeah, so he's cross with people who haven't just followed him blindly into this war of choice, into this offensive conflict. But the big difference between Trump and previous presidents, even Bush and the ill-judged Iraq war, allies were consulted in advance, and the idea was to try and persuade them in advance, and some went in, tragically the UK, and some did not. But to just expect your allies to blindly follow you when you've already made a decision is problematic, and he's finding that. But that's why the Metro call him petulant. Petulant is the word, isn't it?
And we do know that he does bear a grudge, and he did say he will remember who didn't come to his aid when he asked for it. So, do you think a lot of the countries now will be regretting their decision not to follow blindly, as Shami says?
I don't think so, but I think that for our country, it means that we are going to have to invest a lot of time and effort on this special relationship going forward, because this aside, it is very important, and our economy is so interlinked with America that we do need to have a good relationship with them, and it will be strained after this. And as you say, he said he's not going to forget. Therefore, there's going to have to be some bridges laid after this. But it's right that we are standing steadfast in the interests of the British nation. And look, it's been embarrassing over the last few weeks what we've been able to muster from our defence forces. So we were not in a position to have gone and joined forces anyway. But what this should represent, I think, is a wake-up call to the government that we really need to be investing more in our defences because the world is increasingly volatile and we're not putting enough cash in.
But equally, the relationship isn't with one man. And I don't believe for a second that everybody, even in the administration, feels as petulant as Trump does. And I know that there is still intelligence sharing. There are at all sorts of institutional levels. They're still very, very close working. We're in the Five Eyes, etc., etc. And the guy's nearly 80, and this is his second term, we believe, according to the Constitution anyway. I think this is a difficult moment, but there will be ample opportunity for it to improve.
Let's turn to the Financial Times front page, and we were talking about this previously. Energy shock to hurt UK growth most amongst G20 economies. Why so, Michelle?
Well, because we are so reliant on imports in the UK for our energy, and the costs are so high already. And the impact that is going to have on business is going to be astounding. They're already shouldering very high costs, and they obviously don't benefit from the existing cap that's in place for domestic consumers. So something is going to have to give. We are, I do believe, going to have to relax some of those additional levies that we put on place on the energy. In the UK, it isn't right that at a time when people are going to be desperately struggling and businesses will be struggling to keep afloat, that we continue to apply those levies. And that's why Kemi has called for that to be removed, which would introduce a 20% discount in effect.
It's going to be a tough decision for the Bank of England on interest rates. I mean, they're rumoured to go up. Inflation could accelerate by up to 4%, we're hearing. But in terms of interest rates and the decision that the Bank of England takes, I mean, that's going to be obviously geared by what we're hearing, that the UK is the worst affected. Well,
they are independent, and they will make their judgment. We've also, of course, got the problem with historic debt and the price of debt, as your colleague said earlier. So energy is a big part of it, but we've also got these other issues around debt and growth. It's a triple whammy at the moment. But I think in the longer term, fuel security will come through green energy. It's not a short-term fix, but in the longer term, we can't keep drilling and say that every time there's a shock in the energy market because, for example, of wars, we can't abandon our climate change commitments.
But I do think it's important to recognise that it isn't the case that we're not getting any oil via the North Sea. We are, but we're in effect importing it from Norway when we could be getting our own. I mean, that to me seems absolutely crazy, especially at a time when we know that people are struggling already. How can people afford the increases that we're reading about that might be coming down the line? And we've got a government that is saying they're going to help people potentially just on benefits. What about everybody else that's out there working already excessive hours, trying to just put food on the table for their families? It's not good enough. We need to change course.
But that's a long-term decision, isn't it? I mean, North Sea oil, that's not going to affect people's pockets today.
No, but it's always going to be a long-term decision if we keep putting it on the back burner. But we need to do that straight away. We also need to get rid of some of those levies, so it automatically reduces the cost that is being paid by people up and down the country. Now, that doesn't mean that we're abandoning green credentials. It means that we're being pragmatic and we're adopting an approach that's affordable for everybody and that it isn't going to bankrupt the nation in the process.
Staying with the economy, the eye front page, UK faces triple shock of inflation, weak growth and energy crunch. Shami.
Well, again, this is really, this front page or a version of it you're seeing in many of the papers, despite other stories. This is going to run and run for a while, and we've got elections coming, and so on. The government is going to have to work very hard to reassure people that the poorest in particular are protected, but others too, and they will have to keep under review the measures that they take to to protect people from this particular shock.
Let's move away from the war in the papers and go to the Mirror front page, and that is that 1 hour of screen a day. This is screen time. New guidance for under fives, 1 hour of screen a day. Parents of under fives told to cut back on TV and tech to help with their development. Your thoughts, Michelle?
Yeah, so this is advice for 2 to 5-year-olds. And I think it is essential that parents instill a bit of moderation and some rules around this, because we're seeing so many children starting school that are developmentally, they're struggling in their development, and we know that reading is a particular problem. Also, creativity and the imagination of these children is going to be hampered unless they are spending more time playing indoors or outdoors or reading, etc. And just constantly watching a screen is obviously going to have an impact on their development. And this is by health officials, so this isn't just politicians that have decided this.
As a former children's minister, do you think 60 minutes is too much?
Look, I think it has to be based on a science. I think the problem with this in the past is that politicians have stood up and said arbitrary figures around 40 minutes, 2 hours, an hour, 1 hour, whatever. And there's not really been the evidence to back it up, to know what actual time is the right time. And I'm sure that this is a developing science as well. As these children grow up, we'll see the ramifications in real time. But I think giving that clearer guidance to parents so that they know what is too much will help them and help inform them. But of course, you want children to be playing and learning and using their imaginations as much as they possibly can. So I think when they're saying an hour, they're like, that's the very, very, very maximum. They're not saying everybody should do an hour.
But if that includes TV time, I mean, that's probably very, very small amount of time for most children that
I was just
age.
going to say the flip side of this is, of course, hard-pressed parents who for years have used the TV in particular, and no doubt now iPads and whatever, as a sort of to entertain their children whilst they're working and doing other things. And I think that we still don't have enough affordable childcare that would allow even preschool children to be well looked after, to be with other children, to be playing, to be reading together, etc., etc. I think that we need more help for families of young children in particular. Not just the diktat and the very good advice about screen time, but also a way to actually make it doable and practical.
And perhaps how to not get them hooked on the devices in the first place.
I think that is the problem, isn't it? And then you've got children demanding certain shows, for example, Miss Rachel, etc., and those kind of shows are humongous in terms of their popularity and their following.
OK, Michelle and Shami, thank you very much for taking us through the papers thus far. When we come back, transgender women athletes are banned from competing in all-female events at the Olympics. Stay with us for more on that and other stories.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Lough Neagh. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dash to the water.
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented.
Been quite some day.
Let me start with breaking news.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Hello again. Olympics bosses have banned transgender women athletes from competing in all female events at the Games. The IOC says eligibility will now be limited to biological females determined on the basis of a one-time gene test. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris asked the head of the IOC why the decision had been taken.
Was there any concerns about having this sex testing applied for the Youth Olympics, so young teenagers are having to undergo this testing? And the science doesn't appear to have changed. Is it just the fact that legally it's now clear you can introduce such a transgender ban? And how much have you been influenced by Donald Trump calling for this ban on trans athletes?
I think on the second question, to start off with that, the policy, and many of you know me quite well and were following me along the campaign and know that this was a priority for me way before President Trump came into his second term. So I don't, there's not been any pressure from us to deliver anything from anybody outside of the Olympic movement. This was clearly driven. In terms of the first question, as I said before, and as the policy very clearly stipulates, that this policy will be for all Olympic events, including youth Olympic events. And this is where it was really important to us, and I hope you can go back through the policy and look at all the recommendations and guidelines in and around the safeguarding that we would like to see in place. We really went above and beyond, I think, talking to a lot of different athletes around how the process should be followed and what does that look like, and the support networks that need to be in place for the athletes.
So the head of the IOC there saying, Kirsty Coventry, that it's always been a priority for her and she hasn't been persuaded by Donald Trump's various arguments.
So when I was Secretary of State for DCMS, the department that covers sport, this was something that was really quite frustrating, because the old policy for today was that the IOC basically delegated that decision out to the individual sports bodies. And I think that what we've seen today is a common sense decision and the right decision, because this instills fairness. It simply isn't fair if a biological woman has trained her whole life to get there and has spent so many hours investing in that training to be picked at the post by somebody that has that biological advantage just because of the way that they were born. And we know that has been deterring biological females from entering sport competitively. So I think this is a really good news story. However, it is a frustrating one because one of the comments that was made today is that it's based on the science, but the science hasn't changed. The science has always been the same. So it's a shame that it's took them this long, but I welcome that they've got there in the end.
Shami, do you agree with the IOC decision?
I think I disagree. I think it's too blanket. Archery, shooting, curling. Are we seriously saying that and by the way, this isn't just about trans people. It's about other people who were clearly demarcated as one sex or another at birth, but a bit like the athlete Caster Semenya, but have certain characteristics, more of the other hormone, etc., etc. Did you know? Interesting fun fact that shooting was actually mixed gender until 1992, when a woman won the mixed gender shooting gold medal, and guess what? Then they separated shooting into male and female categories. Are we really saying that a trans woman will not be able to compete? I just think if it is as blanket as it sounds, I want to see more of the science, and I'm not convinced that the IOC as an institution is above politics or above being influenced by Donald Trump. So I'm just a little bit suspicious, and I would like to see a bit more detail. And if we're going to talk about common sense, let's have a bit of common humanity as well, and think about people who will be hurt by this, and perhaps disproportionately, such as those sports that I mentioned.
So do you think that it should be limited to specific sports where there would be an overwhelming advantage?
Well, I think it's obvious, and we heard that some sports are about strength and speed and endurance. But as I say, archery, shooting, curling, skateboarding, I'm not convinced that a blanket ban is the right approach. And the massive testing of every athlete for their sex, even when there's no doubt about their sex. I just wonder about whether there isn't some culture war geopolitics going on here.
Michelle, do you think it should be more nuanced and maybe applied to a sport like boxing, but not applied to, as you say, archery or whatever?
No, I don't. I think that this should be quite simple. And I think that what we've seen in the last few years is that the tide has really turned on this debate, because people have been not as afraid to put their head above the parapet and say, hang on a minute, this isn't right. And you talk about the testing. Let's remember, this is one test in your entire life. It's not invasive. It takes a few seconds. It's a quick swab inside your throat. Athletes are used to being tested regularly anyway because of drugs and doping. So this is not abnormal for them to consent to testing. I do think that this is the right call, and I think many people will agree with me on that.
So a trans woman, for example, though, as I say, this doesn't just apply to trans people. There are other people who are going to be shut out of sport altogether, or Olympic-level sport by this. But a trans woman would now be unable to compete in Olympic shooting altogether. Is that fair? Is that proportionate?
Look, I think if you look at the flip side of this and what has been happening, we've seen scenarios where women have trained literally their whole life. People that could have been Olympians have been coming out on our airwaves saying, I am giving up competitive sports because it is just not fair anymore.
And some sports there's an advantage.
We have run out of time.
Shooting?
Thank you both. You're going to agree to disagree
on that one.
We've got much more time coming up. Do stay with us.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond. You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Tonight on The Wrap, the PM's regrets about Lord Mandelson. The Prime Minister tells Sky News that he beats himself up and dwells on the mistake he made in hiring the disgraced peer.
There's no criticism anybody else can level at me that will be as harsh as the criticism I've dished out for myself.
Donald Trump's chief negotiator says Iran is looking for an off-ramp from the war in the Middle East. His boss again delays a threat to attack Iran's energy infrastructure, but tells Tehran to get serious.
They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal.
Here, a warning that the UK is facing a bigger economic hit from the Iran war than any other major economy. We discuss the day's biggest stories with the Labour peer, Baroness Chakrabarti, and the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Michelle Donlan. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including coverage of the war in the Middle East. Good evening, Shami and Michelle. Welcome to you both. Now, the Prime Minister has told Sky News that he beats himself up over his decision to hire Lord Mandelson, and he dwells on it. Files released earlier this month revealed Sir Keir Starmer had been warned before employing him as US ambassador that Mandelson's links to paedophile Jeffrey Epstein posed a reputational risk. In an exclusive interview with our political editor Beth Rigby for the Electoral Dysfunction podcast, the Prime Minister says he hates the fact that he made such a mistake. Take a look at this.
When I looked at that vetting document,
the continued friendship with Epstein, the sackings from Blair and Brown administrations, I don't get why you put him back into post. Surely your instinct was, I don't want this guy near my government. Are you angry at yourself that you maybe didn't follow your instinct?
Nobody has been harder on me in relation to the mistake I made there than me. And I'll tell you for why. I've spent years trying to deal with violence against women and girls. And as I look back at it now, and the mistake I made, I've been really hard on myself. In the immediate days after this all came out, I was particularly hard on myself. So, yeah, everybody else was criticising, I guess, all that. But nobody was criticising me more than myself. I'm not trying to, make that a mitigation or an excuse, but I know I made a mistake.
I can see that you feel that.
I know that after nearly 20 years fighting violence against women and girls, I made a mistake there. And I hate the fact I made that mistake. And I dwell on it. I beat myself up about it. It's certainly not a mistake I'd ever repeat. But there's no criticism anybody else can level at me that will be as harsh as the criticism I've dished out for myself.
Well, after that interview, Beth, who's been with the Prime Minister in Finland, gave us her take on what he'd had to say.
Look, we did a longer interview with the Prime Minister, and towards the end we talked about the international crisis, we talked about how all our lives were going to change. He gave some insight into how he's going to handle our energy bills, signalling that not everyone is going to get support from the government. And then towards the end I asked him about Peter Mandelson, and he was pretty emotional, actually, the strongest I've ever heard him talk about it. When I asked him about whether he regretted it, whether he hadn't trusted his own instinct, he told me that he deeply regretted it. He said no one feels worse about it than he did. He said he hates the fact that he appointed Mandelson, and no one gives themselves a harder time than him when it comes to that decision. And he was clearly deeply troubled that he did it. He linked it back to his long-running efforts to tackle violence against women and girls, first as the Director of Public Prosecutions before he came to office as Prime Minister. And you could see that he was really feeling it in what I would say was the emotional part of that interview. He was also pretty strong on President Trump, talking about how he wasn't going to be pushed around by him. Stronger language again than I've heard from the Prime Minister.
Michelle, do you feel any sympathy towards Sir Keir Starmer?
I must admit, I don't really feel sympathy on this one. I can understand his inner turmoil and how he's reflected upon the decision that he made, because he's really going through like a death by 1,000 cuts now. It is one story after another, and we know the next tranche of the Mandelson files, as they're known, will be out just after Easter, so he's going to have more to come. But let's not forget, this really does highlight his own personal judgment, but also his lack of a political antennae, really. He had huge neon warning signs. This was a man that was known as the Prince of Darkness. He'd been sacked from government twice. His own national security advisor had advised him with big warnings about this appointment. He'd had warnings in his box, as we found out, and yet he still made this decision despite all of that. And so he is going to be reflecting upon why on earth he did that. And I think many in the country will be asking that question.
And do you think people will necessarily believe that he made a plain and honest, simple mistake, or that he took a gamble on Peter Mandelson that simply didn't pay off?
Well, the gamble was a catastrophic mistake. So, and you know, Beth Rigby is probably one of the finest political interviewers of her generation, and you saw the reaction that she extracted there. But my sympathy is for the women. I read just in the run up to International Women's Day earlier in the month. I read Virginia Giuffre's memoir, and goodness me, it is hard reading. And there's a bit in the conclusion where she directly addresses the various men who claim they didn't know what Epstein was up to. And she talks about all the signs that would have been there on the island, in the homes. I have lots of Labour colleagues who feel very, very angry with the former Lord Mandelson, who feel very, very betrayed by him. People who worked with him previously in government, because the House of Lords is an older house. They feel very, very betrayed by him. I guess for some people he was going to be the Trump whisperer. He was some kind of political genius, and not something that I've ever particularly thought. And at the end of the day, the FT in particular were running these stories about this relationship. They were questioning the former Lord Mandelson, and he was sometimes telling them where to get off in no uncertain terms. I think, yeah. So my sympathy is with the women, and frankly with hard-working Labour candidates up and down the country who will be taking a hit for this. I know that they're taking a hit for it on the doorstep. You know, they've been called names about it, etc., etc. It was a terrible, terrible mistake. We've now got all this stuff about Mr. McSweeney's telephone, and it's and the tragic thing is that, you know, whatever people say about, you know, Keir Starmer not being very political, etc., etc., he always said that he was Mr. Rules and Mr. Rectitude, and this will, well, as you saw in the interview, I have no doubt that he will be haunted by this.
Yeah, but he said he was Mr. Rules until he got into power, didn't he? Because we had the suit gate and we had a series of other issues around his appointments which went sour. And it's been a bit of a pattern. And I think that the layering up of all of those things cumulatively has completely eroded that image that he once painted of a fresh start and whiter than white.
I think what I'd say is, you'll know better than me because you were a cabinet minister. I'm just a humble backbench peer and a human rights lawyer. But you will know from your own appointments, from your advisors and so on, that half the battle is surrounding yourself with the right people and not the wrong people.
I absolutely agree.
And that's a big judgment in itself. Who are your closest advisors? And you make wrong judgments about that, and then at the end of the day, though, you make advisors advise and ministers decide. But this cabal of mostly men, who were the closest in that circle, who had historic links to people like Lord Mandelson. Goodness me, they've got a lot to answer for.
Michelle, you alluded to it before by saying it's death by 1,000 cuts for Sir Keir Starmer. How do you characterise the damage that this has done to his premiership?
Yeah, well, I think because it wasn't just a one-off series of headlines, it's been week on week, there's been something else coming out around this saga. Like today we heard that Mandelson's phone, we couldn't see the WhatsApps for the first month because he just used a personal phone. So it's things like that, questioning why did that happen, for instance. Then we've got the next tranche coming out in Easter, and I think the real damage is because it is drip by drip by drip, that it is tainting him and his administration and the judgments that were taken. And then you're going to have the May elections, which by all accounts and the polling looks like it's going to be devastating for the Prime Minister. And the two combined, I think, will topple him. And I suspect he will be gone by June, to be honest. So it has been extremely damaging.
Do you think this is a moment where we ought to repeat that the former Lord Mandelson denies all wrongdoing?
We've done that. We have done that. we have done that. But it's interesting what you were saying about those within the Labour Party who were perhaps previously close to Peter Mandelson. What is their position now? Have they all distanced themselves from him?
I don't know, and no doubt he'll still have some friends and people who will presumably be concerned about his well-being, because it's quite a catastrophic fall from grace and so on. But there are a lot of people I've spoken to in the Labour Party, particularly older colleagues in the House of Lords, who just feel so angry and upset and betrayed, and not just on a personal level, but because of what's at stake. These are not ordinary times that we're living in. We could be looking. Well, we're looking at the threat, for example, from reform. This is not business as usual in British politics. we're looking at a party led by Nigel Farage that could be incredibly divisive for this country. And so it's really, really important for the government to succeed. And as I say, it's pretty. So there is the coding up to there is the terrible, terrible treatment of these young women and girls, which we have to just put front and centre. But there are also now the allegations about government papers and privileged government information during the Gordon Brown premiership being transmitted to Epstein. That's incredibly. Anyone who's been in government will know how important it is to keep secrets secret, because they're market sensitive or because there could be security implications or whatever. So some people that I have spoken to in the Labour Party see those allegations, if they are founded, as being the most catastrophic, one of the most catastrophic breaches of trust. As I say, these are allegations at this point. Let justice run its course. But there are some people feeling very, very upset in the Labour Party about this.
Just to say that interview with Sir Keir Starmer that Beth Rigby did is the latest episode of our Electoral Dysfunction podcast, and you can listen to the full episode tomorrow morning or search on your podcast app, or you can watch it on YouTube. Now, just before we move on, this happened just a few moments ago in California. The latest SpaceX takeoff.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
MID chamber pressure is nominal.
This is the SpaceX's Falcon 9. It's targeting the launch of 25 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit from a Space Launch Complex 4 East. Successful launch there, I think we can safely say. Now, after days of claims, counterclaims, threats and rhetoric, we received today perhaps the clearest assessment yet of the state of peace talks between the United States and Iran. America's top negotiator, Steve Witkoff, confirmed for the first time that the US has presented Iran with a 15-point framework for a ceasefire. And he said Iran was looking for an off-ramp, but that the challenge now was to persuade Tehran to make a deal. Well, tonight, Donald Trump claimed the Iranians have asked him not to destroy their energy plants, and he's holding back on that for another 10 days. Our US correspondent David Blevins reports.
They're firing tomahawks, but they're talking too, so says the commander-in-chief.
They are begging to make a deal, not me. They're begging to make a deal.
Nearly 4 weeks into this war, he claims Iran is signalling its intention to negotiate, now that the United States has removed Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
The supreme leader wasn't so supreme, no longer with us. It's very sad.
The president's special envoy seems optimistic.
I can say this. We will see where things lead, and if we can convince Iran that this is the inflection point with no good alternatives for them, other than more death and destruction. We have told Iran one last thing. Don't miscalculate again.
But the self-proclaimed war secretary doesn't sound convinced.
We pray for a deal and we welcome a deal, and we have the ultimate deal maker to make it happen. But in the meantime, as I said yesterday, the Department of War will continue negotiating with bombs.
And the president doesn't sound like a man under pressure.
I mean, I read a story today that I'm desperate to make a deal. If I was desperate, he'd be the first to know. Pete, let's get the hell out of there. I'm the opposite of desperate. I don't care.
So the bombs continue to drop. It's a military triumph, they say, and one of their own making.
I'm so disappointed in NATO because this was a test for NATO. They have an expression, a great expression, never forget. You can never forget.
The UK still incurring most of the president's wrath.
The UK say that we'll send, this is 3 weeks ago, we'll send our aircraft carriers, which aren't the best aircraft carriers, by the way. They're toys compared to what we have. But we'll send our aircraft carrier when the war is over. I said, oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Don't bother. We don't need it. And we don't need it, and we don't need them.
If Trump's feeling the heat, he isn't showing it, talking at length about his pens.
So this pen is very inexpensive, but it writes well. I like it.
How his Treasury Secretary looks.
I'm looking at this guy. He's central casting. Even the glasses are perfect. Where do you get those glasses?
And how long he'll wait for a breakthrough.
In Trump time, a day, you know what it is? That's an eternity.
No rush then for Donald Trump's war cabinet. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Day 27 of the war. Do we believe that there is progress and that we're moving towards real negotiations? Steve Witkoff saying that he's been able to share his 15-point plan for peace.
Well, it's hard to know because every day we seem to take 2 steps forward and then 4 backwards, don't we? And it is evolving very quickly, but at the same time we're getting so many mixed messages coming out. So I think we will just have to wait. But we heard there that President Trump was saying that Iran are desperate for an off-ramp. But by all accounts, actually, it is America that is also desperate for an off-ramp. This has took a lot longer than they had anticipated. It's costing a lot of money. Telegraph sources are saying that they're actually low on weaponry. And we've seen the economic shocks globally, given the cost of oil. And yes, America is more protected because they're not importing to the same degree that we are, and they have their own sources. But that too will affect them if this continues to rumble on. And we saw the president delay his trip to China by a few weeks, indicating that potentially he anticipates this will be over by then, and maybe he is going to step it up and step back. But the 15-point plan has been given today. However, Iran came back with their 5 conditions, some of which will be completely unacceptable to the United States. One of them, they were asking the US to pay for the damages of what they've caused. They're not going to do
looking
that.
for reparations and not to be hit again in the future. But in terms of the president there saying that he's the complete opposite of desperate, and then went on to say that actually he doesn't care.
Well, look, we were talking about the Prime Minister's travails a few moments ago. The upside, for, you know, the little glimmer at the moment is that the Prime Minister being seen to not be dragged in to the war by the President of the US is actually pretty popular with people. So on that issue, at least, he's in a better position.
So every time he criticises Sir Keir Starmer, that's good news for him back home, is what you're saying?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I think we've seen this with Sadiq Khan in London, that it has not hurt Sadiq Khan when the Prime Minister has made these awful comments about him, and the same could be said of President Zelensky. Look, if the President is right that the Iranians are begging for a deal, well, that's good news, because that means the deal will be easy, particularly for a man who is Mr. Let's make a deal. So, but more seriously, it is good that there is some communication, and we believe that there is some communication with Pakistan as intermediary, not talks, but messages. And OK, they've got a 15-point plan, they've got a... That's how negotiations begin, isn't it? With people putting their first position in any kind of negotiation, whether in business or, more importantly, in this kind of situation. So that's something, and we must hope and even pray that those messages go back and forth and at some point mature into sort of reasonable, sustainable talks.
I think that Trump as well is hearing it from both sides now, isn't he? So on the one side, his polling is at an all-time low. He's seeing the economic pressures, and he'll be getting a lot of advice and pressure to try and stop this war as quickly as possible. But then on the other side, the other Gulf countries that had tried to resist and warn against this war in the first place, by all accounts, some of them, including the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, if the reports are correct, are now lobbying, saying, don't finish this war too quickly, because you will leave us in a much worse position, because then we'll have to re-solidify our relationship with Iran, and we'll be on the back foot, and we need to actually see this through. So there's both sides that he's being pressurised by at the moment.
But those relationships with other Gulf states are forever changed now, aren't they? Because they were bystanders, neighbours who had no beef really with Iran, and they've been hit directly.
Well, they're going to be quite sceptical of. It's going to be interesting about their ongoing trust in discourse, not just with the United States, but with Israel as well. You know, you've got some of these big, hard men around the world who are all very pally one minute, and then inevitably, you know, it doesn't last. Their approach to geopolitics is the scariest and the most unpredictable of my lifetime. And I was a teenager during the Cold War, and I think sometimes the world today is scarier even than in the Cold War, because at least you had some sense of these two great big blocs acting somehow rationally, and it's that sort of slight irrational element and the difficulty in predicting what people are going to do from one minute to the next that is so disconcerting.
That's really interesting analysis there.
From an old woman.
You're not. You're not. Should we take a break and we come back? The impact of the war on the UK economy is what we're going to be looking at. Stay with us for that.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
a special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
You are watching The Wrap. Now, the first big assessment of the economic impact of the war in the Middle East has found that the UK will be the hardest hit amongst leading nations. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has more.
How bad is this going to be for the economy? We've just got our first assessment from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, this big kind of economic institution. And they say, in short, not good. This was their forecast for economic growth before the war came along, and they were expecting it to get a little bit weaker in the coming quarters. That's kind of one quarter in a row, just for global growth. But now, and that's partly because of, like, you know, trade barriers and all of the other things going on in the global economy. But now, look, this is the pathway they're expecting. So they're downgrading their forecast for the global picture. But when you break it down by countries around the world, it's kind of striking here. So I've highlighted the UK there. This is the last year that we've had. And they were already expecting growth to be a bit weaker this year. So the UK was kind of mid-table last year. This year it was expected to be kind of around about there, so a little bit weaker. But now that we've had, well, what's happened in the last few weeks, here's where they expect it to go. So look, the UK has just been downgraded quite significantly. Interestingly, the US gets upgraded. So stronger growth in the US because of what's happening. That's partly because we've got higher gas prices, higher oil prices, big oil producer, big gas producer in the US. But the UK downgraded actually by 0.5 percentage points, which is more than any other economy. So a big downgrade, not good news for the UK, and raises the question, of course, why is this happening? Well, part of the explanation is that the growth was already relatively weak, and they've, you know, the latest numbers aren't particularly promising. But partly it's a few other things as well. Think about the fact that we've got very high debt levels in the UK, and the debt interest costs are rising here. And actually, this is just showing you the 10-year bond yield in the UK. It's kind of what the government, we have to pay on government debt, highest since 2008. And if you compare the UK to other countries around the G7, so other major economies, look, that's the rest of the G7, that's the UK. It's kind of an outlier. So we're paying higher interest than most other countries around the world. On top of that, energy costs. Now, the extent to which higher oil prices, gas prices feed into inflation differs by country. So that's the US, an extra 0.3% on inflation. The euro area, an extra 0.98% on inflation. But for the UK, it's even more. I mean, it's not much more than the euro area, but nonetheless, it is more. So inflation feeds through in a way that it kind of, is more exacerbating for the UK than elsewhere. A final thing to note, there is a real impact on all of our pockets, but it differs by different income groups. So for high-income groups, the extent to which inflation is affected by energy costs, which is basically what these bars are showing you, is not that high. But for low-income groups, because more of their income is spent on energy, it is higher in the UK than basically anywhere else. Put all of that together, and it helps explain why, particularly for low-income households, but also for the UK as a whole, the economic implications of the Iran war are potentially very serious.
So why exactly are the implications for the UK worse than elsewhere?
One of the key reasons is because energy costs are so high already, and because we import so much of our energy, that leaves us vulnerable to those increases that we're seeing on the world stage that is happening from this war. And we, of course, don't know how long that is going to last and the full ramifications. But what the OECD have said today is that it is going to mean an increase again in inflation. And what we had anticipated is that the Bank of England would reduce interest rates a couple of times over the course of the year to come. And actually now we're expecting that they're going to increase again. And we know that people are already struggling with the cost of living. So their fuel bills going up, petrol costs going up, inflation, meaning that costs of everything going up, and the cost of holidays with jet fuel going up is just not going to be affordable. And this is, of course, against a backdrop of a government that have increased spending, increased borrowing and debt. And we have youth unemployment at its highest in a decade. So the environment in which this has happened in was not a strong one either to weather this storm.
And Shami, we know that Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, that something that they wanted to do in this term is to make life more affordable for people and to put more money into their pockets. Now they're facing inflation suggested at 4%, could accelerate to 4% this year.
It is a challenge, but they need to respond in the way that people would expect of a Labour government. And so I think it's right that they've promised help for the poorest families in particular. I take Michelle's point that it may not just be the poorest families who need help, subject to how long this goes on. I know that we will disagree about drilling in the North Sea because we've been sitting here for a little while together, but I think long term we really do have to improve our energy security, and I think the future of that is with greener energy. And there, and to be fair, that was something that in the past, people in your government agreed with as well. Going forward, we do need greater energy security, and I would say that means green energy.
Michelle, you don't believe that's to be the case? No,
because I think energy security means being pragmatic and realistic. This is not about saying you're anti-renewable. This is about saying, OK, let's make sure that we are adopting plans that are affordable for our nation, that are not going to bankrupt our nation. And to me, it seems bonkers that we're now in a situation where we're actually importing from the North Sea, from the Norwegians, when we could be getting our own. And yes, of course, the most vulnerable must always be looked after in society. But nobody is going to be able to afford these eye-watering costs that are potentially coming down the line. And Middle England is going to be really, really hit to a position where they're not going to be able to put food on the table if we carry on like this. That's why there does need to be help across the board, potentially by taking away some of those levies that are on energy prices at the moment, which would mean an average of a 20% saving for everybody.
Well, the government says that they will keep all these measures under review. But as a priority, I do think you have to start with the poorest, because even that analysis from your colleague showed the difference in how much energy prices affect different groups in society, and the poorest need to be the priority.
Indeed. Well, the war dominates the front pages again, so let's see what's making some of those for tomorrow's newspapers. Well, on the front of the Metro, Donald Trump says the UK's aircraft carriers are toys compared to US ships. The US president also says he's extended his deadline for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. That's on the front of The Guardian. That 10-day extension is also on the front of The Times. The Financial Times leads on a report that the UK will face the biggest economic hit from the Iran war of any major country, as we've been discussing. The Eye also reflects on the state of the economy with a headline, UK faces triple shock of inflation, weak growth and energy crunch. The government comes under fire in the Express as it emerges more than 30,000 hospitality firms have shut since the Chancellor's first budget. Rachel Reeves also features on the front of the Mail, who accuse her of profiteering from rising fuel prices. The firing of a top banker amid growing fears of a cover-up is on the front of the Telegraph. The Mirror reports on new guidance on screen time for children under 5, which experts say should be limited to 1 hour per day. The Sun also has that story. Its headline, 1 hour is your lot, tots. Meanwhile, The Star warns fake World Cup football kits could make you ill due to the chemicals in the fabrics. Shami and Michelle, let's start with the front page of The Guardian, and that is Donald Trump extending that deadline for another 10 days and claiming that the talks with Iran are going very, very well, and he's not at all desperate.
Well, I mean, whether he's desperate or not, I do notice that extension would take us past Easter and Passover, and I just wonder whether there might be something in that.
Why do you think that's significant?
Well, because it would be pretty awful if there was some kind of outrage from Iran or its proxies, you know, during that period, and maybe this extension just creates a little space for more of these messages, stroke talks via Pakistan to just calm things down over that sensitive period in the calendar. It's good news. It's a de-escalation from Trump, regardless of all the clowning around and the rhetoric.
Yeah, Michelle, are you optimistic by what the president has said in this latest post? He says that talks are ongoing, and despite erroneous statements to the contrary by the fake news media and others, they are going very well.
That's you, presumably.
Not at all. Definitely not us.
Well, given the ups and downs that we have seen over the last few weeks, I wouldn't make any predictions based on this, but I'm hopeful. And the president was meant to be going to China, to Beijing, and he's delayed that, but only delayed it by a few weeks. And the reason that he gave was that he was in the midst of a war. So that, again, is indicative that he is thinking it will be over shortly. However, this is a president that, if accounts are to be true, thought that this was going to be quick anyway. So we will see what happens.
Just some breaking news to bring you. We're hearing via the Reuters news wires that Iran's foreign minister is saying that he's in a call with Guterres, that preventing vessels associated with enemy and their allies through Hormuz Strait is Iran's legal right. This is, according, this has been on Iran Press TV. So that there not seeming to be a de-escalation.
Well, yeah, and I think this is going to prove the sticking point of this war, really. When Trump entered it, the objective was obviously not the Strait of Hormuz, but given the importance that it plays to the whole global economy, in essence, I think that really does have to be something that Trump isn't seen to concede on. And something that the West needs him to make good progress on. And obviously Iran keeps saying that that's their red line too. So I think that will be the thing that potentially could delay this conflict.
Does the Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz, does that give Iran more of a bargaining rights, do you think?
Well, of course, you know, both sides have their bargaining chips, and it's all very well for Iran to say it's our right to block our enemies. Well, if we get a deal, they won't be your enemies anymore. So the tough language is coming on both sides. They're getting some of theirs out there now that, you know, Donald Trump has said so much, but there are still these messages that are going back and forth via Pakistan, and I just have some hope that could lead to something positive. Hope, you could say it's the hope that gets you in the end, but for now, at least there are talks about talks, or there are messages about potential talks, and I think that's something we really have to hold on to.
Which is a de-escalation.
Particularly at this time of night.
We have to keep hope alive. Michelle and Shami, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. When we come back, more stories in tomorrow's newspapers. Do stay with us.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
You're watching The Wrap. We're still taking you through the newspapers with Shami and Michelle. Let's take a look at this story in the Times. This is page 3 of the Times, and this is the freedom of the City of York being rescinded from Sarah Ferguson. Michelle.
Well, I think, again, a right call to make, given all that has come out about how much she continued her relationship and her friendship with Epstein after he had been convicted as a paedophile, and how that was covered up afterwards as well. But she really has gone to ground, hasn't she, since this has all come out, and been extraordinarily quiet. But I feel very, very sorry for her children, who have had to be dragged through this. And of course, their own identity and relationships have now been had a spotlight shined on, and this was the making of their parents, not them.
Mm. And we know that Andrew also had the same honour rescinded back in 2022, I think.
Well, it's something that local councillors can do on behalf of the people of York, who will be feeling as disgusted by all of this venality. Because you've got those who are mixed up in the actual sordid abuse of these girls and women, but you've also got those who were just in it for the money and the kudos and the hospitality, the venality of it. I say good for the City of York.
Yeah, and the reason why Epstein managed to continue his evil acts for so long is because too many people turned a blind eye when they knew what was going on. So
because they liked being around the money, the powerful men from all these. As I say, if you read Virginia Giuffre's book, it's very, very hard reading about the scale of the abuse, but also these people in this gilded circle of some of the most influential and wealthy and powerful men on the planet.
Mm. We also know Peter Mandelson, because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein. He was ejected as the US ambassador on the front page of the Times, asking questions about messages from his personal phone. He wasn't asked about that in terms of the vetting.
Mm. Yeah, so we're not able to access any of the messages for the first month that he was actually in office, because apparently then he used his personal phone. I'm a bit unsure as to why he didn't have a work phone during that period, but I'm also a little bit unsure as to why we can't get those messages anyway, because even if he used his personal phone, we should be able to request them.
Well, I'm sure that he will volunteer them, particularly as we all think that's quite a good idea. So if you're watching Lord Mandelson...
But the article is saying that he hasn't been asked to hand over.
Yeah, which I find quite bizarre, because why haven't we asked him to hand them over? He was in a role and he was using his personal phone, which you know, ministers do use their personal phones as well as their work ones from time to time. But the rules are that if you are discussing government business, you are then meant to give copies of that to officials to log. So if he was primarily and only using his personal phone to conduct government business on, it's quite right that we therefore ask to see those
So I
messages.
think at this point we agree that either the Metropolitan Police or the government, whether it's the Cabinet Office or the Foreign Office, probably need to ask for sight of this phone.
Especially given the magnitude of the allegations. Of course, they're allegations at this moment in time, but we're talking about an individual that potentially and allegedly has betrayed his nation by giving important dossiers and information to somebody outside of government. Now, the stakes are very high if that is proved true. So we need to see all the information. We need to know if that is a pattern of behaviour throughout his career in politics or it was isolated to a certain period.
It remains to be seen whether we will have access to that information, because as we read, it hasn't been asked for as of this point. Michelle and Shami, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. Good to see you both. When we come back, we can take a look at the sport. And was this spectacular goal, there it goes, enough for Wales to book their trip to this summer's World Cup? Details of that and Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland's playoff matches.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dashed to the water.
Wait, what country are you from? The UK. Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented. Been quite some day.
Let me start with breaking news.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Let's take a look at all of the sport now with Teddy.
Did you have conversations with Rafa Benitez?
Yes, through his agent and a couple with Rafa. That's another reason he put me off. He started talking about me playing left back, which didn't sit nicely with me. I was just starting to play regularly in centre midfield for a few years, and he spoke about me being a bit more versatile. He didn't sell it too well.
After 4 bids, the latest thought to be £15 million, Liverpool insist they're still talking to Villa and have not made a final offer.
Liverpool put a bid in, which wasn't accepted by Mr. Lerner. Mr. Lerner went back to them and they didn't go through.
I don't think Villa were difficult, to be fair. They set a price and stuck to it in the absence of other deals. We didn't have the funding to complete it.
Once again, his relationship with the Anfield board is under scrutiny. The veto of Gareth Barry's transfer from Aston Villa prompted renewed suggestions Rafa Benitez enjoys less than full backing from Liverpool's owners. In response, the club have released this statement. It is obviously the selling club's prerogative to put whatever price they want on the player, but on this occasion, Liverpool think the price quoted is too high.
There were other priorities. One of Rafa's points was that Gareth was versatile, that he could play left back. The owners, which by that stage were Tom Hicks and George Gillette, pointed out we'd just spent quite a lot of money on De Sena, a left back. Unless we could raise some money, it was going to be too expensive, and then it became contingent on being able to sell Shabby, which didn't happen.
And Liverpool fans blame me for Alonso leaving, but not once did he say Alonso was going to be leaving.
Quite why there was no interest in Shabby is a bit of a mystery, because clearly he was a phenomenal player and a phenomenal talent. And we bought Robbie Keane the same time, of course. Seems like small numbers now, but we were looking at spending a net 20 million each season, so the funding just wasn't there.
Gareth became terribly disappointed with Liverpool. I think, to Gareth's astonishment, a couple of weeks later they paid £20 million for Robbie Keane.
I think that was a signal to Barry that, did you really want me that much?
When I knew the transfer was going to happen, I got my head down. There wasn't too many boos.
Who would have thought Gareth Barry's Villa career would come to this? Booed at every touch by the fans that once loved him.
He's got a face for music, really. You should leave, to be honest.
There were chants of Judas, booed every time he touched the ball.
It's been a long, long saga, really long. It's been talking about maybe 16, 17 weeks now. And of course, I think that some stage or another, it must affect you.
Mentally, it was a real tough period, and I regret doing some things.
I think he probably felt that he let himself down. I think he thought, I'm normally a more measured character than that, and I've dropped my guard, and look at the mess that it's got me into.
We let bygones be bygones. He came back. If he'd gone to Liverpool in the manner in which he did, he wouldn't have gone with my blessing. No. I would never have spoken to him again.
We all knew that if Gaz came back and he wasn't...
Let's see what's happening with the weather now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the next few days will remain on the cold side with showers or longer spells of rain. Rain will affect northern England and Wales at first tomorrow, with drizzly outbreaks for central England and the southeast of Ireland. Most other places look dry, if a little chilly in the clearer north. England and Wales will see rain becoming more extensive through the morning, albeit mostly light, but Kent may well stay dry.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, that was the wrap. Thank you so much for watching. All the top stories coming up right here on Sky News next.